Hello everybody, this is my face. My name is Dan, I am HLTCO. I am the guy who for 12 years has gone by the handle HLTCO on Twitter, had the Twitter page, the blog, the podcast, etc. But I have never put my face out there for people to see, and there are a multitude of reasons for that. They are many, as I said, and this is something that's going to be linked in the description to this video below, because I recorded a podcast on it specifically back in end of November, early December, I think, explaining why I've never put my face out there. And the primary reason for that, above all else, is that I am someone who suffers with cerebral palsy, and with that in mind, there has been a real push and pull and emotional turmoil that has gone alongside my perspective on myself as a human being and how exactly I feel about being a disabled man. That might sound a little bit self-indulgent, I guess, to some people. You know, I completely understand that. But I don't want to go over too much old ground in this video, because ultimately, you know, it's about putting a face to the name and getting myself out there so that I can start recording YouTube content primarily. But just to sort of précis what the podcast itself said, as someone that grew up as a football obsessed kid and wanted to ideally play football on the weekends, you know, it became very clear to me as a relatively small child that wasn't going to be something that was open to me. I sort of poured all of my energy into gearing my education so that I would be able to have an active part in football in terms of the sports media bubble. I know that sounds a little bit too forward thinking to some people maybe, but you know, from the age of 7 or 8, I guess, I was very much focused on wanting to be a sport journalist, as geeky as that might sound. I used to write match reports all the time for games that were on TV. I geared my entire education towards it, my A-levels, etc. I went to uni, studied sports journalism at Eastbourne, or Brighton University Eastbourne campus, and you know, wanted to get into the industry. For a number of different reasons, I didn't go down the formal path of working for a publication, and that's where HLTCO came in, because it gave me the opportunity to talk about Crystal Palace first and foremost in a fan model, but one that was geared towards writing with the blog and getting my opinions and posts out there. And over the last few years, that has grown. You know, I've still talk about Palace every day. I record a Palace podcast every day alongside the general football one. But my opinions on football have become, in terms of the social media presence, more broad. But the primary reason for me not putting my face out there to begin with, ultimately, was that throughout my childhood and at school, as someone who I've just mentioned, was football obsessed, I always had this part in the back of my mind where I was thinking, are people telling me that my opinion on football is valid because they feel sorry for me or want to include me, or, you know, oh, it's Dan, you know, Dan, the kid who's got cerebral palsy who likes football, we'll just tell him he knows what he's talking about. And even though that might sound a little bit too self-involved, it was always part of my sort of psyche. And with that in mind, the anonymity afforded by Twitter meant that I could discuss football, and all that mattered was that I was a Crystal Palace fan who went by the handle of HLTCO, and it was sort of the purest form of social, how would you call it? It was sort of the purest form of social judgment, in the sense that if your opinion is solid, it will be one that is given time. If it's not, then it will be ignored. And it had nothing to do with my disability or all of the different factors that go into, you know, my own self-worth, if you see what I mean. And, you know, eventually I let people know that my name was Dan, then Dan Cook. I've sort of drip fed it bit by bit. But, and this sounds very much, as I say, self-involved. I appreciate that coming out on YouTube and doing this face reveal is by its very nature quite a self-indulgent thing. but it's the next step really in my, without wanting to go to X Factor, journey, because I've come to a point in my life where at 34 years old, I've now got a house, I've got a wife, I've got a 3.5-year-old son, and I don't feel the need to hide away anymore, or to feel as though I should be ashamed of being a football fan with cerebral palsy. I know that sounds ridiculous to some people, but it's difficult to put into words that sort of fear of judgment that comes with people knowing that you are how you are. Because I appreciate trolls exist, they always will, some people are just horrible bastards and there's nothing you can do about it. But I never wanted my social media presence to lead down a path where someone would say to me, oh, you're only famous, or you're only got X amount of followers because you're that football fan with cerebral palsy. I never wanted it to be a crutch that I lent on. I wanted it to be something that was an afterthought. And I really feel like, having started HLTCO in 2011, I've now reached a point 10 years plus in where, with 100,000 plus followers and no one having a clue that I had cerebral palsy until 6 to 8 weeks ago, that my opinion is valid, and I know that now. In my heart of hearts, to myself, it's been proven, and that is a huge part of it for me. So, I'm sure, hopefully this YouTube thing goes well, hopefully it thrives and it adds another sort of string to my bow, it diversifies the income, it means I can continue to do this long term. But I'm sure there will be trolls along the way. There have been on social media, there is in life generally, and YouTube will be no different, I'm sure of that. But I know at my core that I've already made a success with this, so ultimately it doesn't matter if people want to come at me for it. There is another aspect, which is the public recognition when you're out and about. I went to Palace v Spurs last Wednesday, and stood there and thought, the next time I come to Selhurst, there are going to be people who arguably will recognise me walking around the concourse, and that is going to be an interesting adjustment. I'm not an intensely private person, but I think everyone can appreciate that it will take some getting used to. I could go out, for example, to Tesco and buy a fridgy yogurt and just mind my own business last week, and potentially now someone's going to come up to me and say, oh, aren't you that HLTCO guy? And that is going to be difficult in the immediate, but ultimately, life is about rolling the dice. It's about trying new things and not being afraid of what might come your way, because what's the point of me doing this if I'm not going to occasionally take risks and put myself outside the comfort zone? So if you do see me out, don't stab me. I'm just out minding my own business and going about my life. But yeah, hopefully in the long run, this will prove to be successful. My overall plan for it, because a fair few people have said to me, what's the YouTube content going to be like? How is it going to differ or change your Patreon? If anyone has followed me on Twitter for a relatively decent amount of time, or if they listen to the Patreon podcasts, periodically I will put out 3 episodes which everyone can listen to. There is no paywall. My plan initially is to make sure that those podcasts are now converted into YouTube videos, because it's a far more accessible platform. It has the putting the face to a name aspect to it, and it should hypothetically mean that it drives more people towards my content and makes it more of a well-rounded product. And ideally, if it goes well, I will do more in the way of free podcasts that have been transformed into YouTube videos, but that is something that I'm sort of going to roll with the punches. I'm going to make it up as I go along. There are plenty of one subject topics that I would like to discuss on the podcast from day to day, but I don't want to put out too many free podcasts or bombard people with content on Patreon, or substitute the sort of daily roundups that I do for initial one subject topics. And this sort of arm of it does allow me to, whenever I want to jump on and discuss something in depth, do so. I'm not going to set any specific targets for how often I'm going to upload. I'm not suggesting it's going to even be once a week at this stage. It's very much suck it and see. But ultimately, I want to make this a success. I want it to grow. I want the content to involve people. You know, I want an active comment section on YouTube. I want people to engage with it and feel a part of it. And if anyone does have specific subjects that they would like me to discuss, then feel free to sort of drop me a line, and I will do my best to put together solid content on YouTube so that your club or your player or your specific topic is given the coverage that you would like it to be given. Because I am ultimately aware that without all of you, my entire income stream is dead. It's nothing, and it's a very humbling place to be. It's something that I am eternally grateful for, and have been throughout my time on social media. Back when I was, writing a blog and earning £300 or £400 a month out of advertising, but I ultimately never wanted to go down the advertising route. I always wanted to make sure that it was organic as possible, that people who wanted to support me on Patreon, for example, weren't walled off from it, that if they wanted to pay me, they could afford it. £2.50, £3 a month to me is something that's very important. I've had people talk to me about upping it in the past. I don't want to do that, but YouTube is another avenue that means I don't have as much financial pressure on the Patreon content. It will still continue. There will still be 5 podcasts general football wise and 5 podcasts Crystal Palace wise every single week, because it's my bread and butter and it's what's brought me to this stage of the HLTCO journey. But I want to be able to diversify, make sure that I am giving people content that is worth their time and energy, and ultimately make sure that people feel involved in what I am doing, because it is you that I am doing this for. It's the love and support that I have been shown on social media throughout my time on Twitter is mind-boggling to me. I actually, and this isn't even something I was going to discuss, but I went up to Glasgow last season to watch Rangers v Celtic at Ibrox. I was very grateful and humbled to be given the opportunity to go to an Old Firm game. I went there with my dad, and we were in a pub the night of that game, just after the game at Ibrox, and we got chatting to a Celtic fan, and he was talking to me about this, talking to me about that. I said I was a Crystal Palace fan. I asked him if he was on Twitter. He said yes. He was a big Celtic fan, knew a lot about the club. And I said to him, "Oh, I'm HLTCO. I don't know if you're aware of me on Twitter." And he was like, "Oh, you're that guy." And my dad, his mind was like blown that a guy in Glasgow knew who I was. And that is, it's part and parcel of it, I guess. But the YouTube thing, putting a face to a name, means that it's far more likely that people will recognise me out and about. And it's something that I've, tossed over in my brain for a very long time. But ultimately, as I said just now, life is about rolling the dice. This may not work. It might completely fall on its arse. And if it does, then I will accept defeat and go back to the Patreon thing and sort of lick my wounds and move again. But I think I want to give this a go. I've invested the right amount of money, I think, to make sure that the production value is decent. I'm not suggesting it's going to be Sky Sports quality, but I think it will be good enough initially for YouTube. There's not going to be any fancy editing to start with. It's not going to be this slick product, but I think hopefully people will understand what I'm doing, they will value what I'm doing, and it can be something that can grow alongside yourselves as the people that have given me your time today to actually watch me on YouTube and see this face. It has immediately made me realise that my teeth are not what I want them to be. I'm already considering teeth whitening products, to be quite honest with you, and ditching coffee and tea completely, because the ring light came on and I was like, oh, that's not good. But we have to roll with those punches and try and make sure that you don't have too much anxiety about your face. I don't think I'm that ugly, but I'm sure there will be people out there that aren't expecting me to look the way I am. I've often had people who follow me on Twitter, I guess, and then they will listen to the snippets of the podcast I put up and they're not sure that my voice matches what they expected. I'm sure there will be plenty of people as well who watch this first YouTube video and don't expect this face to be who I am. But this is me. This is Dan Cook. This is HLTCO. And if you have seen me out and about or around Selhurst, then feel free to come up and say hello. But don't jump me, because ultimately for the first 4 or 5 months, maybe even 6 or 7, it is going to take some getting used to. But yeah, I'm out there now. This is my face. As I say, I'm not sure quite when the next video is going to come or exactly what the topic is going to be, but you can rest assured that it will be a relatively in-depth look at a specific footballing subject, because that's what I love to do, and I like to think that I've got a relatively good handle on different football clubs and being able to discuss them. It might be Palace, it might be something else, it might be about an individual, but this YouTube journey is one that I am committed to making a success, and as I say, hopefully that is where we go together. But yeah, as the YouTubers say, like the video, subscribe, you know, because it helps the algorithm. I've seen this many times, but it's the first time that I'm saying it myself. And yeah, I will sign off there. Hopefully you have a good day whenever it is you're listening to this, whether it's Monday when I put it out or later in the week or even in 6 months time, and you've just stumbled across this YouTube channel for the first time, and hopefully you want to subscribe and see more of my content. But yeah, I will sign off there. It's Sunday the 8th of January 2023, and as mad as this sounds, I am out there now to be mad in my head, at least, not maybe to you, but as mad as it sounds to me, I am out there. This is Dan Cook, this is HLTCO, and yeah, it feels very liberating. Cheers.